So, hello everyone. My name is Błażej Szklarek. I'm a local coordinator of the Students for Liberty in Poland. And today, with great honor, we have a pleasure to welcome Kiyah Wills, the fellow in the Objective Standard Institute, that's going to talk about her story, how she came from like the woke communities into more rational, free market, capitalist way. So, without further ado, let's welcome Kiyah.
Okay, first I want to check the sound, make sure everything's good, because I tend to stand too far away from the microphone and nobody can hear me, so let me make sure it's close enough. Okay. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and thank you guys for having me today. This is my first time in Europe and my first time in Poland, and this experience has been amazing. There's so much history here that we don't have in the US because our country is just so young that we haven't had the time to build all the things that you have. The architecture is amazing, all of the buildings are so beautiful, and the food. The food is so good. We went today and got Polish food. We had dumplings and stew, and it was amazing. The US, nothing compares there. And the people here have been mostly so nice. And I say mostly because if you guys weren't aware, last week I was supposed to speak at King's College in London, so not here, but over in the UK. And my event ended up being canceled because of protesters. People were very, very upset that I was coming to talk about the conflict in Israel. And it started with a small protest and turned into a huge viral protest with thousands of people threatening me, my co-panelists, and the student group that was hosting this in the university. And one of the reasons why the event was canceled and why they were protesting was because they had accused me of being an alt-right, fascist, ultra-conservative. And I find this really funny because my full-time career is to be a content creator. I make content for Twitter and TikTok and more recently Instagram. Public speaking is kind of new to me, but my content tends to kind of piss off the traditional left and the right. I kind of agree with the left on some things, agree with the right on some things, but I'm definitely not an alt-right conservative. But because I disagree with a lot of these students who were kind of woke leftists on one issue, and they obviously had not looked into other things I believed in, they painted me as this alt-right, conspiracy theorist, fascist, which just wasn't true. And in a way, I kind of understand where they're coming from just because I used to be one of them. If I, or a speaker like me, had come to my college campus when I was in school, I also would have been out protesting without doing my research, without understanding what this person actually believed, because I kind of just followed whatever the group was saying. I was woke. And when I use this word woke, a lot of people have questions, like what does this actually mean? Because it's kind of this package deal of ideas. You have some of these more socialist ideas packaged with this outrage culture where people aren't supposed to speak their minds, packaged with people being offended over every little thing. And it's not always clear what these ideas have to do with each other, right? Why does someone who wants higher taxes also want to be offended by somebody using the wrong name for them? Like, these things don't seem like they go together. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today, is what is wokeness? But when I was originally planning on writing this talk, I wanted to go into critical theory and postmodernism and Marxism, all of these big academic terms that led to what we see as wokeism today. But the problem is, well, one, that would be a very, very boring talk. And also, when I was woke, I didn't know any of those ideas. I didn't read Marx. I didn't know what postmodernism was. I didn't know what critical theory was. I had been told that wokeness meant being aware of injustice. Now, what are these injustices and how do you know that we're aware of them? Well, I think probably the best way to explain this is to tell you my story. How I became woke, why I became woke, and how I ended up getting out of it. So I was introduced to wokeness at a very young age. I was born in New York State in the US, and where I was born in the US was very diverse. And by diverse, I mean racially diverse, culturally diverse, religiously diverse. So, people with varying skin colors, eating different types of food, wearing different types of clothes, and praying to different gods. But it was very politically homogenous. Almost everywhere where I grew up was on the left. They wanted higher taxes, more government regulation, stuff like that. I moved around a lot when I was younger, and everywhere that I moved was very similar. The towns that I lived in were all very left. Until I eventually moved to Texas. Now, where I lived in Texas was kind of the opposite of where I grew up. It was racially homogenous, almost everybody lived there. It was religiously homogenous, everyone who lived there was Christian. It was culturally homogenous, almost everyone who lived there was born and raised in the American South. There wasn't a lot of immigration there at the time, not only from other countries, but even people from other parts of the US didn't move there. And it was politically homogenous, but in kind of the opposite way that I was used to. Almost everyone there was a conservative. So this was a culture shock for me and my family. We weren't used to this. And to make it even more of a shock, this was during an election year. So I moved to Texas in 2008. I was 9 years old. And Barack Obama, I don't know how many people are familiar with Barack Obama or anything about American politics, but Barack Obama, at the time, we had never had a black president. And he was running as the first black person to be nominated for president. My school decided to have a mock election. Why I decided to have a mock election for 9-year-olds, I don't know. Because I didn't know anything about politics or policy at the time. So I just went along with wherever my parents were. Obama, he was the Democrat nominee. And to my surprise, I was the only person in my class who voted. So I went back to my parents. And I'm asking them, you guys are supposed to be voting for the correct candidate, the good candidate, the right candidate, and yet no one else in my class seems to agree with you. So what's going on? And what they said is, well, Barack Obama's black, and your classmates are white, so they're not voting for him, or their parents don't want him to win because they're racist. Because they don't want or don't think that black people should succeed in the country. So because they all voted for the other candidate, they probably don't like you either because of your skin color. Now this went against everything that I had seen with my own eyes. Even though I had only been at this school for a little while, I hadn't been having issues with my classmates. None of them had been mean to me, kids can be mean, but if they were mean, it was about something silly, like I didn't share a juice box with them or something. It was not a racial conflict. So it didn't really change the way that I interacted with my classmates, like what my parents had said. But it did put a little bit of paranoia in my mind. Because now I'm questioning in every interaction with them. Are they racist? Do they see me as less than? Am I just not aware of it? Or, are they actually good, nice people and my parents are? There was something else I took away from this experience, which was, I think, if there was a chance that my classmates were racist, maybe I could actually change their minds. If I was super successful, did really well in my studies, then maybe I could show them that their racism was silly. So that's what I did. I worked really hard. I got good grades. I had an extracurricular activities I was involved in. I made really good friends. And as I got older and I went to high school, I actually changed schools because I got into a better school. Now, the school was similar demographically to the school that I was at. It was overwhelmingly white, Christian, conservative, everyone kind of from the South. But this school had a DEI program. So, if you don't know what DEI is, these programs are kind of in the US and most schools, most businesses, and what they're supposed to do is make the environment more inclusive for people who are different, whether it's that they're racially not white, religiously not Christian, they're from a different country, or I don't know, they have a different sexual orientation or something like that. It's supposed to be helping people get along, or at least that's what it says on paper. What I figured out pretty quickly is that that actually wasn't the case. The DEI program at my school had these clubs, affinity groups. And what affinity groups are is that they separate people into these clubs based on these characteristics. So there's an affinity group for Black students, for Asian students, for Hispanic students, an affinity group for international students, for LGBT students. And then there was an affinity group called Allies, which was for everybody else, which was 99% of the student body. So pretty much, they had just separated everyone who was not like white, born in the US or straight, from the general like population, had that whole kind of assembly, which didn't seem very inclusive to me. But anyways, I went to the Black affinity group because that was the one that I was invited to. And where I thought it was going to be us talking about, I don't know, maybe cultural differences or I don't know, maybe something productive that we could do in our school, it ended up being just a lot of complaining. We came and we sat in a circle and everyone talked about how mean all of the other races were and how their lives were so hard because white people exist. Now, again, this was not my experience. I had friends from different races, including white people, talked about it. And I was doing fine, succeeding in my classes, again, I had good friends, all the activities I was involved in. So I was kind of confused as to why all of my classmates were talking about how terrible our school was. But everyone kind of had the same story. And these affinity groups are supposed to be these safe spaces. So you're supposed to share whatever's on your mind, whatever you're thinking about. And I decided I would share my experience. I would say, you know, I am happy here, and I'm doing well, and your experience is just a lot of fun. That was a bad idea. Or actually, it was a good idea, it just wasn't received very well. People looked at me like I was crazy. There was a very awkward silence. And after this particular affinity group meeting, one of the older students came up to me and told me, you shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have said that you're happy. You shouldn't have said that you're doing well. Because if you tell other people that you're happy, and you tell other people that you're not experiencing racism, then they won't feel safe to talk about their stories. This is a safe space, but only for people who want to complain. If you don't want to complain, it's not the place for you. I didn't like this. And for two reasons, right? One, I was being told to lie. But also, this idea of DEI, this way it was implemented in my school, just meant pushing this narrative that the entire school was bad, that a certain race was bad. And that seemed like the opposite of diversity and inclusion. It seemed like homogeneity and exclusion. But, okay, I left the DEI department and went on with my life, had my friends, had my classes, was doing well. And then the 2016 election came along. Now, how many of you have heard of Donald Trump? Okay, a lot of you, yeah. He's very famous and very controversial. And in 2016, I still wasn't very involved in politics or policy. I was following the election. I didn't know what he was talking about. I hadn't listened to any of his speeches. But what I had heard from all of the adults around me, who supposedly were supposed to inform me about what was happening, that Donald Trump was the embodiment of evil. I had a family member who thought that Donald Trump, if he had won the election, was going to reinstate slavery in the US. I had adults around me in my community who were saying that if he was going to bring concentration camps to the U.S. and put anyone who he didn't see as American enough in these in these camps. I had a teacher who cried because she believed that women were going to be revoked of their citizenship in baby birthday camps like the Handmaid's Tale. Now, I think that there's some legitimate criticisms of Trump in the way that he does things and his policies. But obviously none of this was true. He won the election in 2016 and the US did not turn into a dystopian hellscape. But that was what I was told. And because I didn't do my research and I was simply listening to people around me, I believed it and I became very afraid. One, afraid that if Donald Trump won, I was going to be killed or enslaved or put to a baby birthday camp. And two, I became afraid of my peers. Because a lot of them were conservatives and a lot of them were supporting Trump. Instead of having a conversation with them about why they were supporting Trump, about the policies of his that they liked, or any other logical reason why they could support him, I jumped to the conclusion that they must be racist, because that's pretty much all I've been told up to this point. So I went back to the DEI department, because I thought they were right. Everybody out to get me. Everybody's racist. They want me to die, and I just wasn't aware of it until now. And the DEI department said, okay, we know how to keep you safe. We know what to do. We had a diversity, equity, and inclusion retreat at the school. And on this retreat, they had an activity called a privilege walk. Now, what a privilege walk is everyone stands in a line, shoulder to shoulder, and there's a moderator who reads off privileges. So it can be something vague, like, are you a man? Are you white? Are you Christian? All of these things that are considered arbitrary privileges. Or it can be very specific things like, can you find your makeup color at the store? Can you find your clothing size easily at a store? Can you find a diet that works with your religion at the normal restaurant? And if you answer yes to these privileges, you take a step forward. So after they run out 50 or 60 privileges, you end up with this hierarchy of the most privileged people at the front and the least privileged people at the back. And what they say is, look around you. Look at where you are in the hierarchy. If you're closer to the front, you are not aware of the injustices, and you can't be aware because you're privileged. And what you should do is look at the people behind you because they know what's right and wrong. So you should listen to them, and they'll tell you what you should think about politics, about morality, about everything. Yeah, this is ridiculous, right? But this was the solution to Trump, apparently, was, well, we can just get everyone to not think for themselves, to stop asking questions, to defer to other people that maybe Trump won't win. Well, Trump won. Didn't win. And people in my school were still supporting Trump, even after the privilege walk. So I thought, okay, this isn't working. There has to be another way for us to fight against Trump. I was very, very pumped to look for more solutions. Because even if that had worked, we couldn't put the entire US in the line and have people take steps forward based on their privileges. So I decided to go to Boston, Massachusetts for college. And Boston is one of the most left, most democratic cities, and one of the most left states. And I figured that by going there, well, one, I would be safe. So I was surrounded by people who thought like me. So hopefully Trump wouldn't be able to legalize slavery there so people would fight back. And two, I would be in a very big college town. There are a lot of universities there, and all of these smart people around me, hopefully at least one of them will know how to stop Trumpism or the Republicans or the right. I thought that the DEI program in my high school was intense. The DEI program at my school in Boston was significantly more intense. One of the first things that we did with orientation was we learned about microaggressions. Microaggressions are things that you say that may accidentally offend someone. It's not in your intention. If the other person finds it offensive, you're in the wrong. And you should not say these things. Now, the reason why they harped on microaggressions so much is because they believed that words were violence. This is a term you might hear if you're in woke spaces. And what they mean by words are violence are two things. One, that the reason that Trump rose to office was because people weren't aware of microaggressions. It was that people were offensive, either accidentally or on purpose, and that inspired this alt-right fascism that they believed was rising in the country. How that works, I'm not sure, but that was what I was told. If you say something that's accidentally offensive, you might lead to the rise of this dictator who wants to, just exterminate a large part of the US population. The other part of reserve violence is, especially with microaggressions, is that if you say something that offends someone, it could affect them so much that their mental health could be destroyed. They could fall into a depression where they are unable to function in life. They could become so just upset and so sad that they want to burn themselves or end their lives. And so you need to watch what you say because you can inspire someone to kill themselves. So with this, the DEI department had a DEI council. And if you said something that was hateful or too offensive, you could be taken to the council or they could punish you. And that could mean being removed from classes or or suspended from university, depending on the severity of what you're saying and how the other person takes it and how it affects them. So me, being, if you can't tell, not very critical thinking at this time, I followed what the DEI department said because I kind of believed them. I figured these were really smart people, knew what they were talking about, and so I should go along with what they're saying. It went along with almost every adult in my life had said for a really long time. So I said, okay, this must be true. And I became involved in the DEI department in teaching people how to avoid microaggressions, teaching people how to police their own language, the language of people around them, and I was policing my own language. And this made me very lonely and isolated because you can't have healthy interpersonal relationships this way. You can't have normal conversations if you are constantly afraid that the person you're talking to is going to turn into a genocidal dictator or is going to go kill themselves. Like the paranoia that you feel is just overwhelming. So I did this for the majority of my freshman year until I got very sick. And I got sick because of all the stress I was putting on myself from having to watch every single word that I said. But I got very sick. I was diagnosed with pneumonia. And I got treated for pneumonia at first, but then I started to get worse with different symptoms. And the hospital didn't know how to treat me. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. I ended up having to take a medical leave from my studies. I ended up going back to Texas, where I was admitted to the hospital there. And after a little while of not knowing what was wrong, I woke up one day and the entire left side of my body was paralyzed. It turns out they were able to diagnose me at the hospital in Texas, and I have a rare autoimmune disorder. And because of the time it took for them to diagnose it, it had gotten very bad. But now that I have been diagnosed, they were able to treat me. Obviously, I'm paralyzed, so the treatment worked, but the recovery was very long. And during this time, I was in the hospital. My parents wanted to stay with me, take care of me to the best of their ability, but eventually they had to go back to work. I had a younger brother who was still in school. My mom had to go and take care of him because he was a minor. So I was in the hospital by myself for a pretty long time. Or I had a nurse taking care of me 24/7. And I realized while I was in the hospital, while I couldn't really have my body, I had to do everything with help from somebody else. And when I say everything, I mean everything, right? I couldn't take a shower, I couldn't get into the bathroom, I couldn't get food without somebody coming and helping me. But I realized that I was in a very vulnerable situation. I was 18 years old at the time. I was the youngest person in the adult ward of the hospital. And while it's not common for people to take advantage of in hospitals, it is possible. And I wanted to make sure that I was as safe as I could possibly be without my parents being around to, help take care of me. And part of this was that I wanted to make sure that I had a female nurse who was taking care of me at all times. But this led to a problem, because what I had believed and what I had been taught in university was that there was no such thing as man or woman. It was just a feeling. It was just what anyone decided that it would be. And so if I asked for a nurse that was a woman, I wasn't sure what I would get. I wasn't sure if I would get a biological female nurse, or perhaps someone who called themselves a woman or identified as a woman, but it wasn't what I thought would make me feel safer. I also believed that words are violence, right? If I offend someone, they might go kill themselves. So I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Part of me saying, I should ask for a female nurse. And if this becomes a problem, I will tell them, this is for my safety, this is important, and I'll just push it until I get one. The other part of me was thinking, well, if I do end up having to, specify like a nurse I need, this person might be so offended that they go and commit suicide. So what do I do? Do I value my safety, or do I value this other person's mental health and well-being to where they could go off and harm themselves? Well, the good thing about this whole situation was that I was in Texas at the time, which was more conservative, and when I asked for a female nurse, it was not a problem. I was able to get someone every single day who helped me feel safer, who took care of me. But I felt so bad that I was even considering offending someone. Because if I had offended someone, I could have killed them, or at least that's what I thought. And I keep bringing on this point because a lot of people who are in this mindset, that is the reasons why they believe it so strictly, and why they police it so strictly, is because they believe that words can mean life or death. For other people around them. But I just couldn't, I started asking questions because I couldn't comprehend how a philosophy or a way of thinking that was supposed to be moral, and supposed to be good, and supposed to protect people, was coming into conflict with my safety. So I started to ask more questions. I went back to school in the fall of the beginning of my second year of studies, and I started to ask questions to my peers and to the people in the TDI department of, okay, well, what happens if offending someone, actually, or not offending someone, avoiding offending someone puts you in danger, but what if these two things clash? Is there actually a fear that we should have in every single conversation that this other person is so emotionally unstable? And I was perceived with I was called into kind of two different types of responding. One was people who were very uncomfortable, and then either kind of laugh and avoid it because like I didn't ask them, or they would get really quiet and be like, "We're asking this, we're not supposed to talk about this. so I can just go along with everything saying. On the other hand, I was met with people who were aggressive. And they would get angry if I asked a question and would say, why are you listening to alt-right conspiracy theorists? Why are you listening to these conservative fascists? You know, if you were a good person and you were listening to the right people, you would understand that you just have to. You just have to watch what you're saying. You just can't be offensive. This is just the truth. So I got really confused. Like, is it that I am crazy and everyone else around me, my mentors, my professors, my peers, my friends, my family are all right? Or is it that they're wrong and I'm seeing something they're not seeing? At the time, my self-esteem wasn't as high as it should have been, and I just couldn't imagine a situation where I was right and everyone around me was wrong. So I went back and kind of started going back along with it. And this made me actually myself fall into depression because I had all these questions. I couldn't really ignore that I was seeing these contradictions between what I believe to be true and what I'm seeing around it. But I'm also not supposed to talk about these things. And every time I bring these questions, I'm being told that I'm immoral or dangerous or doing something that's wrong. So I'm spending every day trying to fight my own brain from asking questions or from recognizing reality. And that was very, very hard to do. I mean, it's impossible. You can't run away from your brain. It's permanently in your head. It works all day. It picks up on things. So I'm fighting against my own mind, and it was just not a good time. Now, COVID in 2020 was kind of a blessing and a curse for me. COVID helped me to start breaking out of this because when everything got shut down, my university got shut down, I was forced to go home, and I was forced to be out of this bubble out of it. And suddenly, I was alone with only my thoughts. I couldn't distract myself from my brain anymore, and I had to confront that I was having these questions and having these thoughts and they weren't being answered. And during this time, I still had my doubts that even my questions were legitimate, or that my concerns were something I should even be giving attention to. Then I had a conversation with my younger brother, who at this time was in college, and he had come home, and he was with me in quarantine. And we were having this conversation about something completely unrelated to politics. He's not very into politics at all. But what he said was, people in Boston are crazy. They are upset with being offended. They are upset with the senior speech. Like, I don't know how these people function in the real world, because you can't control their speech outside of university campuses. There are people who are just going to say things. This conversation was like what I needed, just someone else to confirm that I wasn't crazy. Maybe we were both crazy, but more than likely, he was seeing something that I was also seeing. So this kind of inspired me to actually start really thinking about these questions, these concerns, and doing my research and trying to figure out how much legitimacy is there to these things I've been taught for kind of my whole life, and how much of it is made up and I'm going to be fed with lies. Now, when I said that COVID was both a blessing and a curse. In the way that COVID was a curse, as I said earlier, I have not been able to. So COVID was really hard because I had to figure out how to take care of my health with the government making it impossible for me to take care of it. And what I mean is, I know what I need to do to manage my disorder. Sometimes I need to wear masks. Sometimes I need to work from home and stay home and not really go out. This is something that my job thankfully allows me to do. I know what medications I can and can't take. There are certain medications that make my disorder worse. Sometimes I need to go to the doctor to actually run tests to make sure that I'm not having any symptoms. And all of these things were made harder by the COVID lockdowns. I needed to buy masks. But because there was a mask mandate in most of the US, it was almost impossible to find masks. They were all out of stock and extremely expensive. I didn't want to have to go to the store to buy food, but they shut down all of the businesses except for certain essential businesses. So I couldn't order groceries to my place. I had to go to the grocery store. And grocery stores to be open, and they had made this panic of the amount of businesses. People were rushing to get food, so there was barely anything on the shelves, which meant I had to go out constantly out into the sickness with my mask that I got that was, from China or something, because I couldn't get them in the US. And I was definitely putting myself at a higher risk. They came out with the vaccine. I couldn't take the vaccine because it was a new development and wasn't approved by my disorder. But I had to have this vaccine passport in order for me to go and do things. I sometimes need to go in to get tests done for my autoimmune disorder, but they told me if it wasn't an emergency, I should go to the doctor. So even though all of these lockdown policies were supposed to be for people like me, for people in these high-risk categories, it just made my life worse, and it made it harder, and it made it very scary. So I was talking to my friends from university, and I'm telling them, COVID is awful. The way they're handling it is awful. I can't take care of myself. I think that we should, help them try to stop what's going on. And they looked at me and they said, why are you listening to right-wing conspiracy theories? The vaccine is perfectly safe. There's no problem here. What you're experiencing isn't real. What do you mean it's not real? You don't know what I have to deal with. I'm telling you right now, my life is hard. No, this is supposed to help you. You're not supposed to complain about this. The left is saying that this is supposed to help you. In fact, if you don't go along with what they're saying, you're going to kill people. So if you're a good person, you're going to go along with this, and you're not going to question it, even though this is supposed to help you, and instead it's making your life harder. A few months later, there were the Black Lives Matter riots in the US. There's a lot of context around that, but what happened was a man was killed in police custody. And people were very upset about the way that policing is done in the US. Instead of going for policy changes or trying to figure out how to stop this from happening again, people decided to burn down half the major cities in the US. Now you can, whether you agree with the reasoning behind these protests or not, burning down Chicago is not going to help the policing get better in the country. But if you question the tactics of Black Lives Matter, if you question the fact that they were burning down cities, I can give you a guess at what people would say to you. Why are you listening to alt-right fascist conspiracy theorists? We have to do this because if we don't, someone will die. Even though people died during the riots. So I realized that it's the same script, every single time. Most people can't come up with arguments to support what they're saying. Most of the people that I talked to, they couldn't think past, this is what the left is saying, or this is what my friends are saying, so this is what I'm supposed to believe is true. And it seemed to be a combination of, social pressure to maybe trying to fit in, but also maybe fear of something bigger, some greater threat that was looming, like this threat of people dying. I'm not sure where this came from, where every single thing that comes up the left, if you don't follow it, everyone's going to die. The last thing that I did during COVID was I started watching documentaries on Netflix, because I was bored, and I had a lot of time. I was in quarantine. And I ended up randomly watching this documentary on cults. And on how people who are in cults get isolated, they get told to question their sanity, they get told that the beliefs of the cult are more important than reality, and they often live in this looming fear of retribution from the people around them. So I said at the beginning of this talk, but I will tell you what wokeness is from my experience. And I believe that wokeness, when taken seriously and actually applied to your life, is a cult. It is a cult that says there are only two options of thinking. There is left and there is right. The left is morally good, they are morally perfect. Everything that they say is correct, we should follow them, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it makes you miserable, even if everything in your life falls apart because you're following what they're saying. And it's because the alternative is that you're on the right, and the right makes you a Nazi, fascist, conspiracy theorist who wants people to die. And this ideology is obviously awful. I mean, I think I've shared a few experiences of my own where I really suffered. But yeah, there's a lot of interpersonal issues with this. It's very hard to form strong bonds with people when you're so paranoid that they might hurt you or you might hurt them, and you can't be open with them about what you're thinking or what you're saying. It also just affects you psychologically in this way where you're trying so hard to reject reality, but you can't. Reality is reality whether you want to reject it or not. But when you're having this disconnect of what you see in front of your eyes and what you're being told is moral, it creates this mental confusion that is just so taxing on the mind. I mean, I want to say, I don't know if that would be too dramatic, but I want to say traumatizing in a way in the brain, because how can you even come to terms with this idea that reality kills people? Like that's not something that you can actually live your life believing. And we see downstream of this that it affects policy as well, because people are so afraid of being bad people, so afraid of potentially harming other people, that they will go along with any policy that comes out of this group, whether it's good, whether it's bad, without question, because of this fear. So here's the question: what do we do about it? Now, I don't know how big or how severe wokeness is in Poland, but I've been in Europe in a few different countries, and people have told me that it's kind of on the rise. They're seeing kind of the beginnings of it. It's not quite as bad as it is in the US yet. So what can people do to kind of stop it from getting there? Well, there's one unfortunate truth, which is that some people's minds won't change. There are some people, and I was one of these people at one point, where there is nothing anyone could have told me that would have changed my mind, that would have helped me see that what I was believing was wrong. And for these kinds of people, they kind of have to go through their own personal experiences and their own journeys to see that what they believe is true, isn't helping them live their lives. But I think that most people who kind of go along with wokeness don't actually believe it. Like, they're not as extreme as I was. And they kind of go along with it out of fear. Fear of social retribution, of losing friends, of people thinking that they're a bad person. But they have their doubts and their questions. Or maybe they think that wokeness is bad, but they've only put there these two options. And so they think that wokeness is maybe the lesser of two evils. A lot of these types of people, I think, don't speak out because they feel like they're alone. And they think that they're the only ones who are questioning these ideas. So I think that probably the best way to handle this, and this is something that I try to do when I can, is just to talk to people. Don't be afraid to have conversations. Like the conversation that I had with my brother, that really was what helped me get out of my own head and confirmed that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to think. It's okay to use your own brain. It's okay to doubt the things that people around you are saying. even if they're in positions of authority, even if they're politicians, even if they're professors, even if they're your parents. There are so many different ways to think. And a lot of people just need to open their minds to that idea that you can actually come to your own conclusions about things. You don't have to fall into one of these two, both kind of dangerous ideologies. So if there's one takeaway that I hope that you guys take, it's that, yes, wokeness sucks, it's awful, but even if there is hope, I think that if, we continue talking to people, we continue having these conversations, and we change minds, then changing a few minds at a time causes a ripple effect. And that's how you change societies and cultures, and you make it so that these things don't get as bad as they are in the US. And people can continue to feel confident speaking their mind, thinking for themselves, and being rational human beings. Thank you.
So there's questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so throughout all your speech and throughout the way that you've shared your experiences, which is grateful, by the way, I'm very good to do that. I've just had one feeling that didn't let me until the end. And once again, microphone? Oh, that'd be helpful. Yeah.
I don't think we can because they are on the wire and we can get.
No possible.
Or maybe just go to stage.
Does this work right now? Should I go to the louder?
Yeah. You'll be here again. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to speak louder for any opinions. But what I was saying is that throughout Kiyah's speech, I just had one feeling that well, that's pretty ironic for me because doing my research before coming here, I pretty much disagree with everything that you said before. And coming here for me is just a way to broaden my political viewpoint because I think it's important to listen to the other side. And it's ironic for me because while I agree with the side that you're against, I pretty much disagree with everything, any example that you've given here. But there's one thing that I want to point out that really stuck in my head is that you've said that throughout this period of time where you've experienced wokeness or leftist ideologies, whatever you want to call that, you were mostly in school. So you're a young person that is very willing to be kind of, well, young person's mind is very willing to be transformed into whatever adults say, whatever we see. It's just how human brain works. We're just like little sponges that even without thinking about what we see that, we remember that, and it's also very dangerous thing. That's the topic for another discussion. Have you ever considered that the fact that you're so drastically on the other side of the spectrum now is some kind of a trauma response to indoctrination? Because I'm going to call it indoctrination that you've experienced throughout young time. As a result of this indoctrination and kind of a trauma response to being indoctrinated and to just being in the wrong environment, because as I'm saying, I stand as a more of a left-leaning political person, but I very much disagree with the methods that you've explained here of how the leftist ideologies should be presented, especially to young people, right? So what I'm trying to say is propaganda has two sides, and if we fall into one of those sides as a young person, we kind of then later see this ideology as bad if we change our political standpoint later in life. So what I'd be interested in is if you considered how leftist ideologies would be, how would you view them if you didn't have any political experience or didn't have that experience that you've shared throughout young times, and then as a, let's say, 25-year-old person, just one evening decided, okay, I'm going to learn about politics, went on Google, went to read some books, and then really make up your mind without this whole process. Because from my point of view, it just really seems like a response to childhood memories, which are obviously bad as I described them. But that's what I don't agree with is just saying this is left and we're different, because it's not left. This is kind of a radically left spectrum, which, even for me, as a person thinking that way, sucks. So have you ever considered that?
I'm being called over conspiracy theorist again.
No, I don't want you to feel that way. It's an honest question, because I've tried to put myself into your position throughout this speech. And if anybody were for like 10 years of my life, let's say, telling me this is right, this is right, this is right, everything else is wrong, I'd also be stressed. I'd also be maybe depressed, as I described. I didn't know how to react, I wouldn't know. But that's not left. I don't necessarily agree with viewing that as left in general, because as a person with a different political kind of spectrum, I could also just go on Google right now and Google up some libertarian stories, libertarian polls, whatever, which would work the absolutely same way. And same for every political spectrum. So from what I can say, and I think that's kind of how I felt it, is that you've fallen into very, very bad series of events throughout your life, but I wouldn't say that it represents the leftist ideologies in this life. Okay,
so there's two responses to this question. One, the idea that I am now the opposite is not true. The idea, I said I used to be racist. I'm not now. I don't see that as a bad thing. I mean, I guess it is the opposite. I used to be racist. I'm not racist. I see that as an extreme change in my views. If that is, the opposite of leftism, then I think there's definitely a bigger issue. I believe in a lot of really, really bad and dangerous things. Again, a lot about other people and the way I'm supposed to interact with them. So yeah, I do believe in things like free speech. I think that is a moral good. And I guess how I got to these ideas is maybe another good thing. I did kind of stop my story as I was starting to come out, but it did take me about 3 years to get from there to here. And one of the things that I think is probably very important that I've hopefully kind of realized in my story, I apply ideas very consistently in my life. So if I'm going to take something seriously, I'm going to take it seriously. And if I believe I'm supposed to sacrifice myself and my well-being for the sake of a collective group, which is what I believe on the left, I'm going to do that because I believe that's moral. And if I believe it's moral, I'm going to do it consistently. I'm a very consistent person. So yes, a lot of my views have changed, and they have kind of become the opposite because I realized that it's actually the opposite of what I was doing that is good. Again, being racist is bad. Being an individualist is good. Censoring speech is bad. Free speech is good. Allowing people to express their ideas and to feel comfortable expressing their ideas is good. I'm not sure exactly what on the opposite you're talking about. If you're talking about free market economics types things, yeah, I believe that I shouldn't be expected to sacrifice myself and my well-being, my income, my health, the things that are important to me for the sake of the collective. And that was what I believed on the left. The government should come in and it should take things from me. It should silence me. It should tell me how to live my life because of what other people want. And I disagree with that as a fundamental moral value. I think that I should be able to live my life and be happy and flourish, and then other people should be able to as well. And I think that free market economics allows people to live their lives and to flourish and to do what they need to do without the government coming in and stopping people. I gave the two examples of COVID and BLM. Well, I guess mostly COVID, because BLM wasn't really like a government induced thing. But it was an example of, again, me wanting to live my life, the government coming in and telling me, no, we know what's best for you, the collective knows what's best for you, and if you don't do what we want, then there's going to be these legal consequences, and I don't believe in that anymore. I do believe that every individual person has their own life that they're living, has their own values, their own goals, their own needs of how to live their life. And the very basis of my philosophy now is individualism. So, no, I don't think it was a trauma response that I just emotionally said, I'm going to, agree with, I don't know, libertarians, even though I don't consider myself a libertarian officially. It took me a very long time to get to where I am now, and it started with building up a moral foundation from the bottom up of how do I see people, how do I see humanity, how do I see myself fitting into this piece. And it starts with the individual. It starts with every person having to live their lives according to their own wants and desires and needs, and us treating each other as individuals according to their own wants and desires and needs. And so that is where I do think that I'm very much in contrast to a lot of the ideas that come out of the left, because the ideas that come out of the left are, in the basis, collectivist, which was the root of the problems that I had before.
Okay, so follow-up question then. Do you think that, because you're very right that throughout the rise of leftist ideologies, throughout the rise of global socialism, etc., it was very much collectivism. But would you say that 21st century leftist ideologies still intact collectivism into one of them? Because I would say that while my political viewpoint is somewhat left, not very much, but somewhat left, I do think that what you're saying about individualism is very valid as well. So I think I would definitely separate those two things, and you think they always go together, or is there a way to separate them?
By leftism, I'm actually wondering now what you mean when you talk about leftism. Are you talking about economic leftism?
I would say too, yes, economically, because first of all, what you're saying, for example, about free speech is very interesting, because, well, I've already outed myself as a left-wing versus accusation. What you're saying is very interesting, because while I don't agree with the examples that, I'm going to say that very simply. The fact that I tell somebody that somebody is an idiot, for example, doesn't mean they're going to have themselves. It's ridiculous, right? But what I'm going to say is that it's nice to have structures that prevent hate speech from happening, for example, in public places. And while I'm here studying at university, I would like to have somebody to go to that I can say to that, okay, so for the last few months, I've been experiencing hatred of this nature, right? And I think this is not something that should be on a publicly owned state university. We should be open to diversity here. Everybody should feel welcome. That doesn't mean if I tell a friend he's an idiot, he's gonna hang himself up. I think those are two very different things. But what I'm saying is, you're kind of attaching the radical left ideologies, such as this radical collectivism or this cult-like wokeness, to pretty much all the left. That's my feeling out of it. And I'm here just saying that, well, that doesn't necessarily go together. Right, the left is a broad spectrum, and I feel like I'm a great example of, yes, I have certain things that I have to take care of myself as individuals, I have my plans, I have everything. I don't want to sacrifice, I don't know, half of my income for the benefit of others, right? But I'm still a living person, so that doesn't always go together.
What makes you left-leaning?
I'm a social democrat and a European leftist.
What do you call non-radical left? Could you give an example? Because you were saying about the radicals. I want to know how you define the non-radicals.
So you want me to give examples of something I would do as a, let's say, government?
I mean, give a counter argument for because I don't see the argument here.
Okay, so a simple question: does collectivism is always in every left or left-wing ideology, or not?
Well, in the things that you've mentioned, yes. When you're talking about this idea that that the government should censor people's speech that they don't like, I do think that that is a collectivist idea, and that's what you just said, that if someone makes you feel uncomfortable on campus, you want the government to stop them. And I do think that that is, a collectivist idea, that what someone else says, if the group or more than one people, they don't like it, the government should come in and stop them. I think that I think that freedom of speech is the individualist idea, and censorship is the collectivist. And it's not really, I guess you could say that there's a spectrum of censorship, but once you step off of the free speech step, you are in censorship. Whether it's a little bit of censorship or a lot of censorship, it is all censorship. It is the government telling you what to say or not to say because of somebody else's feelings. So I think that, when we're talking about censorship, I do think that is a collectivist idea. When you talk about economically, that you wouldn't want to give up 50% of your income, you'd be willing to give up 40% of your income or 30%. I think, it is also a collectivist idea. That is still the idea that you should be giving up, or forced to give up, some amount of what you've worked for the sake of other people. And the amount doesn't necessarily matter. Again, I guess there is 10% versus 100%. There's different amounts here. But once you step into this, yes, you should be forced to give up some percent of what you've earned for other people. That becomes collectivist. So
by that logic, having here on campus an authority in which I can talk to because somebody did something to me, whatever, is already not free speech.
What the ideas are. Do you only want to be discriminated? No. So,
Usually you'll be able to boil it down to the process of electing this entity, right? That should be like defending whatever like values or rights like we agree on. So usually it comes down to that, like outside.
That is like trying to avoid borders, but still building borders. Like, if you feel like something bad is going on the campus, for example, still is like something called police, or it's not like you have to put something new to avoid something bad. You know what I'm saying? Like.
So you're saying there's already authorities in place that can take care of this problem?
No, I think she's kind of saying. I don't quite get what she has.
So guys, I do have another question for Kiyah.
What I wanted to step out a little bit, like let's continue like Q&A question, then like this discussion.
Oh, that's
will be
interesting
a
discussion.
long one.
I'd
Very interesting.
I'd love to continue.
So let's leave it for the after party, because we have plenty of time then, and we have like 15 minutes still here. So like
Okay.
So we have multiple examples. As I said, those people are kind of speaking in the on the very, let's say, far left spectrum, and what you experience, for example, in Boston. And it's difficult to form relationships or really discussions on the real life and politics. But we also have examples of, like here with our friend, we can speak and exchange our ideas. But what do we do with people that position themselves as enemies to us and immediately close up any communication, any relationships, any possibility to have something neutral to speak about and to agree on? What do we do with these kind of people, these kind of groups, which are growing, I think, and we can all see them in our daily lives?
Repeat the question a little bit louder. I got the beginning, I missed that.
Yeah, so how do you approach and what can you do about people that are not allowing us to have a discussion and to see which points we can agree on?
Okay, yeah. So I have discussions. I kind of said this in my talk, but I think that there are some people who are very, very closed off to thinking anything outside of what they believe in. And those people, you really can't force other people to listen. I know that's not probably the most helpful response. I guess incentivizing people and explaining to them how, listening to other ideas could be beneficial to them. It could help them lead to, ideas they didn't think of before. But if that type of approach doesn't work and you're like, I've already decided that you are just awful and I don't want to hear anything that you're saying, I don't think that there's much that you can do about that. And I don't know if anybody else has...
Leading by example?
Leading by example. Leading by example is actually very good, yeah. Being open to discussion and maybe other people will be inspired to do the same. Yeah, you can't really force other people to listen.
Kill them with kindness.
Kill them with kindness.
So maybe I'll ask one question for you. How do you think this correlated? Because as you mentioned before, in the younger time, while we being in those communities, like having a low self-esteem, going through some problems and so on, how is it correlated with the mental health that we can observe right now that it's going in a really bad direction? Like we have much more depression going on, suicide rates and so on. So how do you think it connects each other?
I think that they are very much connected. I think that obviously mental health is complicated and there are a lot of reasons why people can develop mental health issues, but yeah, the number of people that I saw on my college campus who had mental health issues was, especially in that kind of community, was definitely very, very high. And again, I think it's kind of for two reasons. One, people being afraid of what they're saying, but also because of this idea that, people are out to get you and people want to harm you with their words, like you should be offended. A lot of people take stuff onto themselves they don't need to, right? You have people who are being told that they should be offended by everything, and so they're almost making themselves more upset and more depressed than they would have been if they could just let small stuff go. So yeah, I could even give an example. There was a time when I was working with a theater group, and I used to work in theater, so I was working with this theater group on campus, and they were casting for this musical, and I didn't think that they had enough people who weren't white in the cast. I was like, we need more non-white people in the cast. And the director said, well, this was a tool that we had to pick from, and the most talented people, and we're not discriminating against people, we're not being racist, but in this case, this is kind of the proportion that we had. And I was just so upset. I went back to my dorm room and I cried. I just couldn't believe that this person had told me, no, he was going to continue to be racist and not bring on more people. And that was such a stupid thing, right? And there was absolutely no reason for me to cry because of the casting of our musical. Well, because I believed that this action meant that this person was racist and bigoted, it made me afraid of this person. It made me afraid that this person was on campus. It just caused unnecessary stress that shouldn't have been there. And again, not everyone who is woke is to the extreme that I am, but even if you believe this to a lesser degree, and you still believe that this person is racist, maybe you don't cry, that's still going to affect you if you're walking around campus thinking that every person who was involved in this musical is even a little bit racist, when that's not true. So,
In short, Elon Musk, Twitter, First Amendment. Elon Musk, Twitter, First Amendment.
very personal. Well, Twitter is a privately owned company. It's owned by Elon Musk.
But Twitter, free speech.
To uphold free speech. Well, because they're a private company, I think that private companies really have the right to have whatever policies that they want, because they aren't owned by the government. So the First Amendment applies to government, it doesn't apply to private companies. So I think that,
No, it's not. I'm trying to be as brief as possible.
Louder, please, louder.
It might require some explanation. Elon Musk is trying, in his own words, to say free speech in the United States to the extent that he bought his own money, huge money, he could have this for freedom of speech. What do you think about it? What do you think about what he did? Was it necessary? Was it maybe good or bad? What's your sense on this?
okay, yes. I think it was great. I'm very active on Twitter, and I think that there was definitely a market need for this. A lot of people were very unhappy with the way that other social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, were taking down people's posts. And again, I think as private companies, they have the right to have whatever policies they want, but there definitely was a need for more news to be spread without these policies. So, and yeah, a lot of the stuff that I say, a lot of the stories that I follow have tended to be been pushed very one-sided on a lot of these platforms. So I love Twitter because I can kind of say whatever I need to say. When I'm talking on or working on TikTok or Instagram, sometimes I need to figure out weird ways to like say things because there are certain like trigger words that will take my posts down. But yeah, so I really like Twitter. It's definitely helped me in my life and my career. But I also think that it is positive that people are able to see all sides of news and stories, good and bad, and to really understand, even if there is bad stuff that's happening, even if there is, bigotry or people who are, spreading lies, now we can hold them accountable, and now we know who is doing these things when before they were kind of being pushed under the rug by these algorithms. So hopefully that answers your question, but yes, I think that Twitter has been a positive for just people understanding, the reality and the spectrum of ideas that people have, both good and bad.
I would like to ask one more question. The topic was how I transformed from a woke non-binary leftist to a freedom fighter, and we get the woke part, but what's with the non-binary part?
Yeah, the title of the speech I think was pulled out of my Twitter bio, maybe. But yeah, so during my first few semesters of school, I identify as non-binary, and maybe I could go into a whole different talk about what that meant and why I believed that. But it was, again, kind of for me, a social thing. I was kind of being told that there are people who identify with this term, and so because there are some ways in which you are similar to them, you should also identify with this term, or else you're invalidating them. And so that was kind of the reason why I ended up identifying as non-binary, was because I felt like this weird guilt about not doing it, which is very silly. But that also is kind of why the hospital situation was so important for me, because the way that I viewed, what is a man, what is a woman, was just shattered in that moment where I call it myself non-binary, but what does that actually mean? And what are the implications of that in the real world, where I'm having to deal with the fact that there are like males and females? And yeah, I ended up rejecting that label. before COVID, in those kind of months before I ended up going home. But yes, that's the reason I did identify as non-binary. It was kind of part of my journey. And yeah, there's more information about that specific part on like my social media accounts. I just love myself real quick. I'm on Twitter at Kiyah Wills. There's a link to my Substack there where I have like my full story on that. And then also on TikTok at Kiyah Wills and Instagram at KiyahW12. So if you want to learn more about my personal stories, I put a lot of those online. So.
Your content is one of the best books in the world, but what do you think is either US have more students or the society in the way that the students are maybe the students that are not fitting with these ideas are unable to apply into the school?
Can you speak up a little bit? Questions?
Yeah, sorry, is it better? Please tell me if it's okay. So you attended one of the best schools in the world, and I wonder whether you think these extreme liberal ideas have more of the students or the society, because the other students that do not fit in these ideas cannot attend the school and get better with their skills and give back to the society.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for one, I don't call this ideology liberal. I call it like woke or leftism, or I don't like to call it progressive either. I call it regressive. I think that liberalism, the term, has kind of been hijacked from classical liberalism. So just for clarification, why I don't like to call this liberal ideology. But talking about, do I think that the reason that this kind of festering in the school is because they specifically picked people who agree with the ideology, or if it was because, or why it specifically festered at MIT. And I do think that if you were to, I've seen all the statistics that show that a lot of these very, like, quote unquote, prestigious universities, I don't think they're very prestigious anymore, most people think they're crazy. But a lot of them are overwhelmingly left when it comes to, just students and professors and people who do admissions and things. And it does seem like if you come in with these ideas, there is like a higher chance of you getting admitted to the schools because people who are in the admissions offices also believe in these ideas. So that doesn't mean that necessarily if you say on your application that you're like a Trump supporter, you're not going to get in. But if you do talk more about how you're oppressed and how you overcome oppression and how you feel like the world is against you when you're so sad because there's just too many white people, like that will help you get in. So I think that that's part of it. I also think that a lot of the people who do disagree are afraid to speak out. So I think that when you have, the culture is built on both kind of prioritizing people who do believe in these ideologies and then kind of culturally suppressing the alternative, it just creates this petri dish of people moving farther and farther into these ideas. And hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so,
The last one?
yeah,
Do you
okay,
have time? Okay, we'll have a minute. A very brief little comment, and then I will ask you a question. I'll give you a chance so I think that I'm neither left or right. I would actually call myself a libertarian, and from my position, my idea is that we should actually let people live however they want to live. Because look, most people, most movements, woke movement, basically every movement, at its core values at the beginning, is usually driven by good to actually prevent something bad from happening, right? Of course, later down the road, it's hijacked by some lunatics that want to use it to take over the government and to create more division. But definitely, we should look for these values that are somewhere out there. Why don't you tell us some more about OSI and the Objects Institute, which is hosts as well this event. You mentioned on our way here, you mentioned the conference that you discovered. So I find it it's a brilliant story. So I'd love to hear it.
Oh yeah, so I guess I kind of left off my story as I was starting to really ask questions about things, but I can finish it up really quickly and tell you exactly how I got here. So over the next few years after 2020, I started asking a lot of questions, doing a lot of research, and I eventually, in 2022, started my social media, started on Twitter, and my handle on Twitter was growing to true. And the reason why I picked that handle was because I knew what I didn't believe in. I knew that the ideology that I was following before was wrong, but I didn't know what to do next. Because again, I didn't believe that I was an alt-right, fascist, conservative, and I was like, there has to be more to watch. So what do other people believe? So I started on Twitter, I started just asking questions, a lot of questions about what people were thinking about different ideas and ways of thinking. And eventually I came across what at the time was called TOSCON, is now called Level Up, but it was a philosophy conference that was about all types of philosophy, about how to live your best life, how to think clearly, and I got really interested, so I applied for a scholarship, I won a scholarship to fly to this conference, and I was just introduced to all the different ideas about how to live and be happy, and that was what got me into kind of the liberty movement, really, was I met a lot of people there who talked about these ideas, and they were the ideas that made the most sense to me. Like, I had listened to, you asked earlier, like, was this just a trauma response? And the answer is no. I had listened to so many different people, so many different perspectives on social media, and I was like, I don't think this is right. This still doesn't make sense. There's still contradictions. This still has the same problems how I was thinking before at the fundamental level. And so I got into philosophy to figure out, okay, at the fundamental level, at the moral level, how do we kind of build our ideas from the bottom up instead of kind of from the top down? And so that's why I got associated with OSI. They were the ones who put on the conference. I ended up doing an internship with them where I read a lot of different philosophers, and now I'm a full-time fellow there. So I read a lot of different ideas and philosophies, and I make social media content, and I write. Sometimes I'm trying to write a lot more because I need to write more. But yeah, that's kind of my story of how I got to where I am now. And what OSI does is, well, one, they have their conferences, and they had one in Europe actually this past weekend. They have one in the US, and they're always looking for like young, active-minded people to fly all over the world and to come to their conferences and learn about these ideas of how to live a good life and how to be your own person and think rationally. And they also have classes where they talk about different philosophies and how to apply good ideas to your life in kind of that smaller classroom setting, or I guess a Zoom setting. But yeah, so that is what OSI does. Shameless plug.
Yeah, I was about to say. Thanks so much. It sounds like this.